Into Monday. This is the advance for February the 16th, 2026, President's Day.
Yes.
Brandon Waltons, who...
What did you get the president today for President's Day?
I got him coming to work and doing the advance.
Good.
Who's your favorite president? And you can't say Donald Trump because that's weak.
Donald Trump, 100%.
Set aside anyone who is president in your lifetime.
I can only say Donald.
You're not going to play that game.
No.
You're no fun. I'm a Grover Cleveland guy myself.
George Washington, is that too obvious?
Yeah, well, it is. I learned, I was today years old that I learned that despite all of us calling it President's Day forever, legally this is Washington's birthday. Mm-hmm. But that we kind of lumped in, well, because we're not going to have Lincoln's birthday so separate from what, because you have to have, all the different birthdays that we now have to celebrate.
Yeah.
So people started calling it President's Day.
Well, I like the idea of lumping in, we've had 45 presidents, so lumping in 45
I get it.
Different holidays, maybe.
Yeah. But, legally, it's still Washington's birthday.
Yeah.
So, anyway, George Washington.
Yes.
Not, your gym teacher in high school or whatever. Now, okay, so this weekend, Brandon, I think that maybe we saw the John Cornyn campaign implode.
This is wild.
Probably this. Here you are. You're coming into early voting starts tomorrow. If you didn't know, early voting starts tomorrow, the 17th, because today's Washington's birthday, President's Day, whatever. The official observation thereof. Early voting is starting tomorrow on Tuesday, the 17th, and that's when campaigns want to get their last good hit, put out their big closing message, whatever, ahead of people starting to vote early. 2/3 of people vote early.
Sure.
And the Cornyn campaign just took both guns and went bang, 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 bang into their feet, is what it felt like.
Yes. Well, and look, we should also mention, we're heading into early voting. It also means we are firmly in campaign silly season, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which is sort of the caveat that I would put out before any of this. I would say this for any campaign, regardless of who they are, right? Mm-hmm. Is that if some big negative story is coming out about a candidate right now, it should really be taken with a lot. You really need to examine that.
And
right?
we've got one of those stories about a different candidate I want to talk about in a second. But let's talk about.
But this story, essentially, what it looks like they were attempting to do, and I'm trying to sort of piece this together because, to be honest with you, Michael, this was some of maybe the worst messaging we've seen from a campaign on something like this before. It was absolutely bungled. Essentially, you had the Cornyn campaign, and through their messenger, Matt Mackowiak, who's been leading communications for the campaign this year, essentially come out on Friday and say they had a bombshell report that Wesley Hunt, essentially the accusation against him was that, he when he registered for an absentee ballot, I think it was in 2016, that the address wasn't quite right, or he something was wrong on his application for it. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but those were essentially the details, which would be, they say, oh well, this is actually this would technically be a crime, maybe so, but it's kind of in the weeds, right?
Yeah.
But okay, this is what clearly the Cornyn campaign was wanting to put out as their big final hit going into early voting. Well, they put that on Friday. They put it out with addresses completely on there. Mm-hmm. The addresses of that Wesley Hunt was at that time, and that apparently maybe some of his family is at to this day now in that address, which is not only problematic in and of itself, but is also, as many have pointed out, a crime to dox elected officials, right? Because there's a lot of safety concerns, right? They don't want
Right.
just putting elected officials' addresses out there and people to cause them harm. The Cornyn campaign took that down, but then you had Matt repost it with it redacted. By that time, I think the damage was already done. You actually had Ken Paxton, the third candidate in that race, coming out and saying this is unacceptable, that he'd be looking into this. And so what was supposed to be this big hit against Wesley Hunt actually turned into, I would say, something that really strengthened a lot of the anti-Cornyn opposition, where you had Ken Paxton and Wesley Hunt actually locking arms in this whole debacle on Friday, which, this all happened sort of on Friday night, played on social media. It's basically fizzled since then. But I think if this was supposed to be their big ace in the hole heading into voting, I think, it's hard. It's really increasingly hard, Michael. Like, anything could happen. It's really increasingly difficult to imagine that John Cornyn is going to win this primary.
Well, and look, I mean, the couple things fascinating there. One, John Cornyn's what this indicated to me was John Cornyn's polling must indicate that he is closer to coming in third than he would like to admit.
Mm-hmm.
Because if he's having to shoot down and backwards at the third place, all the polling shows Ken Paxton in the lead,
sure,
not with the majority, but in the lead. And a lot of the polls have kind of shown that Cornyn and Hunt narrow, mm-hmm, which meant Team Cornyn must think they really have to, get rid of him. They don't want, the momentum going what momentum does. Mm-hmm. They don't want Wesley Hunt passing them and keeping Cornyn out of a runoff. Mm-hmm. That's the only way you can explain that kind of hit. The other thing that kind of occurred to me was looking at the structure of this alleged bombshell was it kind of points to the problems for a lot of folks in trying to navigate the early voting absentee ballots, and voting by mail. I mean, Wesley Hunt is a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. He was a helicopter pilot, no slouch intellectually, right? And if he's not getting the form right, and no one is claiming, or at least with any sense of credibility, that Hunt was trying to game the system or doing wrong. He just that kind of points to this problem. Maybe we need to fix some of these forms.
Yeah,
there's a lot of sympathy for Wesley Hunt. That clearly you then see the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, step in and say, okay, this is nonsense.
Yeah, and if you turn on a TV too, I will just note that you have a lot of the pro-Cornyn super PACs playing ads against Wesley Hunt right now. It is very interesting. And like you said, I think the polls would suggest, if you're going by the polls, that this would likely be a Cornyn-Paxton runoff. But the fact that there's so much firepower coming from Team Cornyn against Wesley Hunt really makes you wonder what their internals are showing.
Yeah, what other internals are showing out. Okay, I want to shift gears to a different race. Actually, well, let's just go down the ballot. We'll save
Sure.
the best for last. All right, I want to talk about the news today that Greg Abbott is hitting the campaign. Try to say news, his campaign camp, letting the media know he's going to be hitting the campaign trail over the next week and a half out and around the state. Campaigning, it appears, for his endorsees, sure, notably Kelly Hancock and Nate Sheets. Kelly Hancock, the acting comptroller, seeking the job full-time, and Nate Sheets, running for ag commissioner. Notable there because both of them are not in a good position, again, according to the polling.
They might show up at some of these stops. And look, and I say this, Abbott has already been out there campaigning with these
Governor Abbott's also going to be stopping in various state reps places and all those
yes.
things. Yeah.
The governor has already been out there holding events with both Kelly Hancock, the acting comptroller, who he's endorsed to take the position full-time, as well as Nate Sheets. They were down together on the border. I think that was early last week. And so he's made some appearances. We expect that will probably that's going to continue. But it is interesting. We did look at these polls last week, Michael, and a lot of the endorsees statewide that the governor has endorsed, specifically we're talking about here Nate Sheets, as well as Kelly Hancock and Railroad Commissioner Jim Wright, for that matter. All three have the endorsement of Governor Abbott, and yet all three are in precarious positions. Either they're down in the field, as Kelly Hancock has been, is I think in third place in this University of Houston poll that came out last week. When you look at the agriculture race, that same poll had incumbent Sid Miller up like 3 or 4 times, times,
48% or something like that, yeah,
above Nate Sheets' challenger. And then Jim Wright, who appeared to potentially go to a runoff, though it's a little harder to tell sometimes with those railroad commission races. It's an interesting position, and it's an interesting thing to compare 2 years ago because, look, we expect the governor to go out. He's done it, just about every time he's been since he's been governor. He's gone out and campaigned in House members' districts and things like that, and we certainly expect that to happen. But it is an interesting question about what that will mean for his endorsed statewide candidates who don't seem to be faring so well, at least in the polling right now.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about one of those now statewide races. Again, this is kind of the unusual story that I think you were kind of alluding to a moment ago, and that is Don Huffines, who's currently in the race for comptroller. Currently, he is leading that race. All the polling has him leading with Christy Craddock, the railroad commissioner, in second place, and acting comptroller Kelly Hancock in third. There suddenly appeared these stories coming out of New Mexico that Don Huffines bought Epstein's ranch. Okay, one, I didn't know Epstein owned a ranch in New Mexico. Okay, that's interesting. Apparently, people knew that, and that Don Huffines bought it, and kind of, this kind of weird story of this is a scandal.
Yeah.
That, I mean, he didn't buy it from Epstein.
He bought it years after his death.
Yeah, he bought it in an estate sale, basically.
Yeah.
His land's for sale. And I'm trying to understand the story because it feels like maybe that the proponents of the story are trying to somehow indicate that that Don Huffines was involved with Epstein. I guess I don't know.
I mean, that's the insinuation.
But
right?
yet they all seem to be suggesting that maybe the ranch should have not been bought by anyone. I don't understand. I don't know what they're trying to get other than trying to impugn Don Huffines, which feels very much like a story being pushed by another campaign for the purpose of trying to hurt Huffines without any real there. They're trying to create a lot of smoke without a fire.
I mean, it's not a coincidence. Right? There are no coincidences in Austin, they say, right? We've heard that before. Yeah. It's hard to imagine that a New Mexico newspaper just decided to report on this story years after the purchase, by the way, of this ranch by the Huffines. Decided to suddenly report on this on I think it was Friday, right ahead of early voting here, and then all of a sudden some people start picking it up. And look, this isn't for or against any candidate here. I would say this for anybody. Like I said, any of these stories that come out right before voting, you have to look at, I think, with a certain amount of skepticism. And so where we are at with this, you're right. It looks like Don Huffines purchased this ranch from Jeffrey Epstein's estate. The
it was
proceeds of which, the auction, the proceeds of which ultimately go to the victims, right? Because of the arrangements there. And in fact, you had some outlets saying, well, that's not true. You have others this morning, actually, Current Revolt posted a letter from an attorney for the estate who said, no, that's how this works. It goes to the victims there. But even broader, I mean, you take a step back, and for me, Michael, it's, well, so what, right? Like, what is the so supposed to be? If Don wasn't running for an office right now, right, would this be a story that somebody bought a ranch? Probably not, right? Obviously, this is being pushed by people, frankly, I mean, I think with in bad faith to sort of create an insinuation to try to connect in people's minds. Oh, okay, Jeffrey Epstein and a candidate in Texas. I think a lot of people
I'm kind of waiting for the breathless reporting that, Billy bought a used Toyota that had once been used as a rental car by Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, it's just, some of this stuff is a little silly. It is
a little silly. And, but again, I think when you're, it's not surprising that it would come against Huffines now, given, as you pointed out, where he's been in the latest polls, which has been leading the field of comptroller candidates. And so that unfortunately comes with the territory sometimes in campaign.
Okay, we've talked regularly when they've come out about the campaign finance reports. We have the 8-day report that's going to be coming out. That's 8 days out from the election. What are you expecting to see there?
Well, it'll be interesting to see. We've talked a lot about in the previous reports how much cash people have on hand. That's a little less important in these 8-day reports. The question is, are you spending that cash wisely, right? Are you actually spending it in a way that's going to affect the campaign? We've started to see a lot more TV buys sort of in the last minute heading into early voting by some of these campaigns. And so I think that'll give us a good idea looking at, how they're spending money, which ones are probably going to be victorious, and looking at some of these statewide, particularly the ones that look like they're heading into runoffs. How do they manage that, right? Because if you're a campaign that thinks that you might be heading into overtime with a runoff, you're not going to want to spend all your money, right? So how much of it do you save? How much of it do you spend? A lot of interesting little things to look at there.
With early voting starting tomorrow, every campaign in the state, whether it's for justice of the peace, through the governorship, U.S. Senate race, they're all looking for volunteers, last minute push for block walking, for waving signs, all these kind of things. You tweeted this morning about a state representative from the Houston area asking lobbyists and journalists to come volunteer in his campaign.
Yeah.
That was a little odd.
A little odd. You had his chief of staff sending out on Friday during work hours. Maybe they took the day off. I don't know. Interesting. But sending out an email for Stan Kitzman, an incumbent state representative, to literally hundreds. I mean, this list of hundreds of lobbyists that are CC'd on this email, saying we still need poll watchers, trying to solicit people to stand polls. Probably not the look that I would guess
a
that
Republican
Representative Kitzman wants voters to think of. Definitely a little bit of a self-forced error there. But it's not, I'll say this in Representative Kitzman's defense, it's not a unique thing. I mean, you do see a lot of times these more establishment people reach out to the lobby. They usually just have a little better sense to maybe BCC when they send those emails out.
Well, you said we're now at the silliest of the silly season, and I suspect that over this next week we will see a lot more silliness.
I think
going
so.
on. All right. Hey, thanks for joining us this edition of The Advance. Hope you have a fantastic Monday, and we look forward to seeing you next week right here.